We need to develop those habits, behaviors, and the mindset. It takes 21 days to establish new habits and 90 days to establish new behavior.
2 days prior, there's a plan that's in place where there's officers on top of that roof that he wants to climb on. Okay, guess what? He would have not climbed on that roof, and he would have not got shots off at the president. Brian, welcome to the School to Embassy Project. So it's been great chatting with you, and it's really good to actually get to have a podcast with you today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do with everybody is just start out with a very basic of what's your background, and then we'll lead into what you do these days.
Yeah, retired Air Force colonel, did 23 years, was an active duty wing commander, so had about 2,500, 3,000 airmen that I was responsible for. And then since I retired in 2010, I've done a number of different things. I work for a defense contractor, helped my wife build her apparel screen printing company, and I'm still act as a CFO for that. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I got involved in the active shooter realm when it comes to schools. And about 3 years ago, after doing that for a few years, I realized that I needed to take what I learned, and I needed to take my background of 37 years of command, of leadership, of training experience, and turn that into a program to empower people today with the ability to know what situational awareness is, to learn and develop that critical skill, because that's what we need to have. We need to develop those habits, behaviors, and the mindset so we can have situational awareness. We can make sure our kids learn and develop that. We can make sure our friends and our community learn it, because that's how we're going to make our community safe. It's by all of us taking on that responsibility as the actual first responders, so we can help the emergency responders that are out there. So my focus now is all left of bang. I stole stuff from a Marine Corps book called Left of Bang, as well as the OODA loop that's from my time in the military, and a number of other things, and have turned that into a proactive program. And again, it's primarily targeted towards parents, families, and their kids. But we go into schools, businesses, churches. The focus is to get as many people empowered today to really learn how to take that responsibility back for our own safety, and then the safety of our families and our communities.
Awesome. And just because I obviously understand the OODA loop and Left of Bang, but if you would just break that down for the audience who is not familiar with that.
Yeah, so start with Left of Bang. It was a book that was written by 2 Marine Corps majors. Actually, they wrote it when they were retired, and it's based on the Combat Hunter program. The Marines were actually losing and getting casualties in Afghanistan and Iraq after the major conflicts, when they were patrolling in the villages and those types of things, because they were being ambushed by IEDs and by enemy combatants. So they put together a program to teach them to look for normal, what normal is. And then anytime you come up, you're out on patrol and you see something that's not normal, left of bang, now you realize, now I've got to take action. I can't ignore that. I have to do something about it. So that was a big foundation of our program that I'll talk about as we go through. But then the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. It's what we do in the military. We know that we're going to have a whole bunch of operational plans when we're getting ready to kick off some kind of operation. I really learned it when my squadron, my very first command as a squadron commander in the Air Force was a 608 Combat Operations Squadron, and we ran the air operations floor in the Combined Air Operations Center. So we deployed to Qatar, and basically we were responsible for the air war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, we were doing the OODA loop all the time. We would show up and have a plan, but we knew that on our side, things were going to change. Airplanes were going to break. Weather was going to happen. We knew the enemy got a vote. So you had to continually be observing, orienting, deciding, and acting. So that's why it's called the OODA loop, because it's something that you continually do. What we did at Paratus is we took that and we took the Left of Bang concept from the Combat Hunter program and developed our Paratus process. And that process is identify, assess, predict, decide, and act. And it's something that you do every time you go somewhere. So if I go to the same coffee shop every single day I go to that coffee shop, I stop, look, and listen, and I identify, is there anything going on today that isn't normal, that sets off that God-given gift of hair on the back of the neck or that gut feeling? No, then you do the second step, which is assess. Can I sit so my back's not to the door? Are there people that could help me if something happens? Who am I with? Am I having a meeting with somebody else? Am I with my family? Where are the bathrooms? Where are the exits? And then the third step is from our perspective at Paratus is the most important. It's the predict phase. It's thinking about if something were to happen today, what would I do? Because that's what most people don't understand. Some people actually do a good job paying attention to what's going on around them. But because they've never thought about what actions to take, they don't know what to do and they freeze and they end up not doing anything. So when we talk about the predict phase, it's the individual figuring out what they're capable of doing in different situations. So one day it may be, what if I potentially see a young boy or girl that I think is being human trafficked? Or what if somebody walks in with a trench coat on in the middle of summer here in North Texas? That's obviously going to set off red flags. What if two people get into an argument and it might escalate? Something I can do to help de-escalate that? So thinking about what would I do in these situations, that's what actually empowers you to act. So every time you go somewhere, you do those 3 steps. It takes about 30 seconds. Now you're in a prepared state. Now, if something enters that environment, you go to the 3rd step. So it was identify, assess, predict. Now you have to decide, is this a real threat? What's going on? You have to use your 10 critical skills. You have to be perceptive. You have to use critical thinking. You have to be able to communicate. And then if you have to, then you go to the 5th step, and that's to act. And the whole focus here is that, in our program, we talk about the 3 Ps. It's prepare, which I just talked about. But then the next goal is to prevent. We want to prevent bad things from happening by de-escalating or stopping them before they even start, or removing yourself or your family from potentially being a victim. Then the 3rd P is protect. That's what you need to do if you can't prevent it from happening, or you can't remove yourself or your family from potentially being victims. So we've taken the left of bang concept, and we've taken the OODA loop and tied that into our Paratus process and the program that we have to empower situational awareness.
So, and just go ahead and give us the name. So Paratus, give us the name of your full company and explain that name real quick.
Yeah, the name is the Paratus Group. I oftentimes just use Paratus, and the reason I came up with that is Paratus is Latin for prepare. So that's the foundation of everything that we talk about at the Paratus Group. People that are familiar with the Coast Guard obviously know about Paratus because it's part of their mantra. It's part of who they are. The Marines as well. But that's why I came up with Paratus. And for us, it's all about that preparation. Only about 6% of the people in our country today actually walk around and have any level of preparedness. If we can turn that on its head, that's how we take back the responsibility for the safety of our communities and our republic, to be quite frank. We need to empower people with the tools to be able to do that.
I think that's quite obvious after a couple of days ago. Now, I do have quite a few things that I just want to touch on real quick. So left of bang, when I first heard you explain that, it took me just a quick second there to figure out you meant left as in everything's moving in a normal line, and then left as in preventative. So we're thinking of what to do before that bang goes off, before the IED hits. A lot of people might not necessarily put those two together because they haven't been worried about IEDs in their life like some of us have. So that's what that means. And then the OODA loop, which I think is great. And along with, you gave several, you gave us a couple of acronyms, and in that there's multiple steps that you're describing, which is phenomenal, because then once you put those words to it, now I can explain that to another person and they can know the things they need to do. At the same time, I think that's what scares people, is that it sounds like so much stuff. And in reality, I like to explain it to people like this. If you were going to go out and get in your car and go to Walmart and get milk and come home, all the steps that you're going to do, there's quite a few steps to actually make sure that you have your wallet, make sure you have your phone, make sure that when you start the car that the lights don't come on, that the battery works, that you have enough gas to get there. There's 1,000 things, little things that you're doing every single time. You just don't think about it, right? What you're describing, I know as second nature, because when you walk into a restaurant, and I think Hollywood does us a very big disservice by making it dramatized when Jason Bourne walks in and he sits down and he's looking all around, and it's so dramatic, and he's going through these steps, and it makes veterans seem like we overanalyze everything. We're all overly prepared and we're stressed. And that's what I get. I get a sense that your average citizen thinks that your average veteran is stressed out all the time. I can tell you that's not the case at all. It's exactly the opposite. And that's what I think is most important for our civilian audience to understand, is that when you are prepared, it takes that stress level actually and decreases it dramatically, because you already know where you're going. If somebody comes into any restaurant, it doesn't matter, any store, if it comes into anywhere, I've already just walked in and just paid attention to the layout of the building. You're doing that too. You just aren't doing it with any intentionality. We're doing it with intentionality. And I think that's the part where your steps might be intimidating to somebody who isn't familiar with thinking through things like we have to survive in the military, right? But I think that's really important, and why it's really good for civilians to learn from military processes like this at your group. Because when you laid it out for me, I was like, I understand every single step that you just laid out, but I don't think of all of the words as steps. But that's truly crucial if you're going to teach somebody, because it's very easy for me to just bypass, well, we don't want to point our pistol at people. But then, you're right, to me, that's second nature. You automatically just know not to do that. When you're dealing with somebody who isn't familiar with any new training, you have to make sure and hit all of the steps so that they're fully prepared. And again, that's what takes that stress level down.
Well, right. And our program is not traditional training. It's actually a year long that starts out with a 90-day micro relearning program, because it takes 21 days to establish new habits and 90 days to establish new behaviors. So that's what we empower, is what you just talked about. And what we've also found, and this is from hundreds of people that have given us feedback, we tell them at the very beginning that preparation actually overcomes fear. When you are prepared, that's what gives you that ability to be calm, to not be stressed. And individual after individual, family after family, that's what we get back, is now they are prepared. But one key thing I do want to introduce is that you also practice your process anytime you deal with your spouse or your boss, or when you're driving your car. Because what we talk about, it's not just active shooter or a fight or something that could happen somewhere. We talk about how parents need to use this when they evaluate the mental health of their kids. Are their kids being bullied? How are their kids behaving? Is their behavior changing? And then to think about, okay, what might be causing that? And then how do I have a conversation with my kids to learn about this? So many parents who today, want their kids to be their friends, give them a cell phone, and then they don't check anything on that. Those are the kids that fall into that 14 to 18 times more likely to commit suicide, because they're being bullied by somebody at school or through social media. And so many parents that have gone through our program, when we ask them, please indulge us and check to see what your kids are looking at, they realize that the phones that they gave their kids didn't open up the world to their kids. It opened up their kids to the world and made them, in a position where they truly could be threatened. So while it applies to, active shooter and those types of things, it also applies to everything we do in our everyday lives. And then the other thing that's in our program is the 10 critical skills. When you learn and develop and practice those 10 critical skills along with the process, that's how you truly learn how to de-escalate, how to be able to identify those threats, and then how to do something and how to act on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you touched on at the beginning as well, of walking into a place and knowing what is normal, right? If I walk into a restaurant, I don't know what is normal in there yet, but I know what isn't normal. And this happened to us actually I think I took my wife somewhere for her birthday is what it was. And so we went to an Airbnb. We go into a gift shop our last day, we're about to leave. And everybody's talking, everything's normal. And then all of a sudden there's a lady who's talking, and she's talking loudly. and nobody else is talking. And so it just caught me like, okay, what's going on? And so I walk over, and all of a sudden this lady has approached my wife, and she has a bird. And this bird is like flapping all over the place and kind of causing a ruckus. Well, she wants my wife to pet the bird, and she's very insistent on this. And all the people behind the counter kind of have like big eyes, like, sorry. And now I get it. Luckily, we're not in danger, but this is somebody that they obviously deal with regularly. This is somebody who's either socially impaired. She doesn't understand just regular cues, right? She might be on the spectrum. She might have multiple different reasons why she's coming up to my wife, a complete stranger, and insisting that my wife pets her bird. And nothing bad happened, but my wife pets this bird. And then this lady, I forget why, but she just started getting angry all of a sudden and kind of luckily walked off with her bird, like angry at my wife, who just pet her bird like she wanted. So it's situations, that's a good situation or a scenario where this isn't some random person who's angry at them and then starts to become aggressive or violent or has a weapon. But those types of things can happen anywhere at any time. It's not going to happen the day you're ready, when you just cleaned your weapon and you just reloaded it and you made sure everything. That is exactly the day nothing will happen. It will only be the day where you forgot something at home and you forgot this, and that's Murphy's Law, and it is a law. It's not a suggestion.
No, and that's absolutely why we talk about at Prodis that you have to always practice that process, because if you don't, that's where that complacency falls in. Where, we talked about prior to, starting the podcast about, getting your license to carry. Here in Texas, you do have to take a class, but the class predominantly is talking about law. It's not talking about the mental health decisions that you might have to make to take somebody's life. It's not talking about, somebody that is 21 feet away with you that has a knife, which that's now a potentially deadly situation. It doesn't talk about the level of responsibility that you actually have when you carry a weapon and when it should be used, because people don't go through those mental health pieces with and then you go to a range and you put 50 rounds through a paper target. Now, all of a sudden, Omni VOR, you're good to carry a weapon. No, you need to, every time you go somewhere, go through that process. Okay, I've got my weapon. This is the type of rounds. I'm going to do everything I can to include running away from a potentially bad situation if I can. If I'm the only one whose life is in danger, I'm going to run away. I'm going to leave. I don't need to I have, one of our 10 critical skills is to be humble. I don't need to prove myself to anybody. But if I'm with my family or others, and now I have to make a decision, it should only be used for violent action. That's the only time you should ever want to use that weapon. And that's something that you have to think about every day when you put that weapon on. And for me, I think about it, it's part of those first three steps. I said identify, assess, and predict. So I'm assessing what's going on, and now I'm predicting, okay, I'm carrying a firearm on my person today here at Starbucks. If something happens, how would I use it? And after you do that over and over and over again, that process is just something that you automatically do. But that is what is necessary every single time. So that, like in the example you just gave, you don't have that complacency. It is something that you thought about every time. It's actually one of the things that law enforcement is working very hard in their training with their officers is to not just have them come out of the academy and then not have anything for another year. It's to have that reoccurring things to be thinking about and reinforce. Don't be complacent. Every time you do a vehicle stop, make sure you are prepared for the worst case scenario. You have thought through that. Learn how to use verbal jujitsu. All of those things that you need to practice and be aware of to de-escalate situations. Like that's the example you just talked about with your wife. Most people today, unfortunately, because they don't learn and develop their 10 critical skills, because they don't have humility, they don't have empathy, because they have never practiced those types of things. If somebody like that were to walk up and to pet the bird, they would probably do something that would have escalated the situation. Your wife was very gracious. You both were very gracious. that person still got a little bit angry, but if you guys reacted differently, they might have reacted differently, because I firmly believe that we control what happens because our words and our actions have impact. We can either de-escalate a situation or we can make it worse, which we saw, at least I personally saw, and I bet you did hundreds of times during the peak of COVID, where somebody wasn't wearing a mask, somebody, really thought it was their responsibility to tell them that's how bad things happen.
Right. Absolutely. And side note, my wife's a combat veteran Marine. She was a diesel mechanic. So she was fully physically prepared to handle herself as well. And that's where the stress just isn't there. So it doesn't come across. I'm really glad you pointed out humble, because I think the perception of the gun owning, concealed carry permit, your average one in this country, the people that are adamantly against guns, I think that their perception is that we are all this, we've got to go prove ourselves. We're going to go pull that thing out of the holster every opportunity we get. And you come and try me today. That is the exact opposite. And that's of the reality. And that's exactly why we don't have more shootings in America, and specifically by legal gun owning, trained, citizens, not even law enforcement, military, because it's that humble. Having a firearm is you have something to even the playing field. If some guy who's 6'4", he just got out of the prison I used to work at, and he's benching 550, that's intimidating. He's been literally in gladiator school, for the last 10 years, and he's angry at you for whatever you just did, took his parking spot, or taking too long at the ATM, whatever it is. If you don't have a firearm, if you don't know, if you have no training, if you haven't thought this through, which again is the key, but if you have that situation going on and you don't know what you're going to do, you don't have any options, you don't have anything to protect yourself, your stress level can be in the black. You could literally lose your mind and just freeze or freak out or do all who knows what. And that's the problem, right? We want to stay in our zone where we can control our mind, where we can do what we need to do that can save our life or others, or prevent something bad from happening. And when people don't have that pre-made plan, like you're talking about, fight flight is what everybody always says, which is incorrect by a lot. Like that's been proven a million times over. Freeze is the main thing. People typically freeze. They do not fight and they do not run. They freeze. And that's why there's so many instances you can see online of videos of some vehicle careening toward and people just standing there watching it come right for them. And you're just, you cringe when you see it, but you got to understand that that's the most likely response of an overloaded brain receiving stimuli that it's not prepared to receive. It's going to just, like your computer does, if you try to just jam in 50 things all at once, it's just going to lock up and be trying to process all that, and it's frozen.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the conversations I always have. For those of you that are listening, if you've got kids in school, you probably heard of the run, hide, fight protocol that they use in schools. Well, if you don't have situational awareness, if you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, if you don't know what you're capable of doing, how are you going to be able to analyze and figure out whether you're supposed to run, hide, or fight? So that's why I talk about, especially when I go and I talk to schools, if you want to empower your students, your teachers to be able to follow that protocol, they have to learn on the front end how to have a process and to be aware of what's going on, to be able to do that critical thinking. And then to your point, to be able to determine what to do instead of freezing. And those are the people that panic. Those are the people that get fearful because they're not prepared. And that is one of the hardest things, two of the hardest things to overcome. The first one is that, they don't fully understand that when you're prepared, that's what overcomes the fear. And then they also need to realize that The traditional training, the check the box training that happens once a year, does not prepare people. People need to have a process where they learn and develop the habits, the behaviors, and a mindset. So it's something that they learn to do and they practice all of the time. And then again, they think about, what am I capable of doing? And that's the other unique thing about our program. And I would get frustrated when we first started doing active shooter training, because I had guys that were, extremely highly qualified, from the military, and they were going in and telling these teachers in this situation, this is what you need to do. Well, that was based on what they were probably, for the most part, capable of doing, not necessarily what the 27-year-old, 5'3", 120-pound woman could potentially do in a situation. So we totally changed the way we talked about it, and we worked to empower them to figure out what they were capable of doing in different situations. Because if we tell them to do something and they're not capable of doing that, we just empower them to freeze, like you talked about. But if we empower them to figure out what they're capable of doing, now we empower them to be able to take that action. And then our next step always was, if there's something more you want to learn to be able to do, then let's get you the training for that so that you can add that to your toolbox. So now if you want to carry a weapon, or you want to have a bat by the door, whatever the case may be, you now add that, but it's something you think about, you actually train to, so that you're ready to do that and to use it. So rarely in any of our programs will we tell anybody what to do. Now, people will ask me what I would do all the time, and so I can give them some ideas. But what we're really finding with our program, when we start a program in a community, and then that community has the opportunity to interact with each other, they learn more from each other and what they see and do in their communities and how they react in their communities, because they're much more like each other than it would be for somebody like me or one of the guys that do the actual tactical training to tell them what they would do.
Exactly. I like what you mentioned there as far as the neighborhood goes, right? And as far as your community, like we saw, and I know we'll touch on this in a little bit, but like we saw with the assassination attempt on Trump, right? There is 2 days prior, there's a plan that's in place where there's officers on top of that roof that he wants to climb on. Okay, guess what? He would have not climbed on that roof, and he would have not got shots off at the president. The day of, somebody standing right there at the ladder, preventing anyone from gaining access to that roof. Prevented. The entire scenario is already prevented. So what you're talking about, and what, School to Embassy Project, that's exactly what I want to focus on too, is I want to focus on preventing somebody from deciding to come into your school to shoot it up. We're not going to be able to just magically know who. This isn't Minority Report. We can't know ahead of time who is got that plot in their head. They already have this process, and this may age well, it may not, but I'm curious to find out if that kid who did the assassination attempt, if he was somebody who had issues in school with trying to come up with a plot to shoot up the school, or made statements about shooting classmates, or had a list. It's super common today for kids to have those and not follow through with it, but to get in trouble for that. So I'm going to be curious if that ever does come out, because the same type of person who knows that they're not going to survive that scenario and then does it anyway, right, is what's dangerous. But again, you still could have prevented all of that from happening. He could have tried something else, but he wouldn't have had a clear shot with a rifle from 150 yards and literally got the shot correct to kill the president. And it's only by the grace of God for Donald Trump to have turned his head in a split second where the bullet doesn't hit him in the skull, hits him in the ear. And so that preventative side is what I want to focus on too. That being said, at an embassy, you focus on everything all the time at once, right? So you can't focus. When I say that, a lot of people will mean that that's what I'm going to just look at right now. No, it's I've got 5 tabs open. This is the one I'm looking at. So the other tabs are still open, and I'm very much aware of those as well. So with the ballistic bookshelf that will stop anyone from making entry or shooting bullets into a classroom, I'm going to do another podcast with a guy, or do a podcast with a guy who has been working on the film that goes over glass. So the people that have shot through glass doors and then just made entry, expecting to easily shoot glass, you kick it in. I've seen every movie, and that's what happens. Well, if they did this and they had his film on the glass door, they're not getting through that doorway. They're going to have to go figure out another way in, and that's going to take time. They've already shot the glass, so now everybody's already alerted. See, and it's that preventative side where you're not having to go out and face off and do the deadly force yourself. That's where law enforcement shows up for that. They're ready, they're prepared, they have all the tools for that, and they have the numbers, right? That's what I think we both, in our estimation of what's best going forward from today for protecting our communities as well as schools and then our own families. It's all about focusing on stopping the situation from even developing. And then if it does and you can't control that, you know what you're going to do, and then you do it.
Yeah, so you have to take the holistic approach, and unfortunately, in schools and a lot of other places, they just think about what to do right of bang, or they talk about technology or the hardening or those types of things, which is very, very important. But there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done left of bang as far as that preparation. We are hearing that an hour before the assassination attempt on Saturday, there was information. So why didn't communication take place? I mean, there's a whole host of things that need to be answered, and we can, play Monday morning quarterback all that we want. I think that you and I both agree that there were a lot of mistakes that were made. The goal needs to be to have programs in place that empower people so that they have communication. If they knew an hour, 30 minutes, and 10 minutes before former President Trump went on stage that there was something potentially going on, why did they even let him go on stage, right? So, but all of those things transfer to things that happen in our schools and our churches and our business and our communities. Oftentimes people will see things, but because they don't know what to do, they don't know how to act, they don't know what to say, who the responsible person is, they don't do anything. Talk about the church that I go to. There is a great group of guys that are level 4 security. They've got their act together. They're on radios. Those guys know what they're going to do. But all the volunteers, all the ushers, none of them know what to do or who to contact if something bad happens. So my philosophy is, and let's just use my church as an example. If there's 1,000 people there, I've got 1,000 set of eyes when they're out in the parking lot, when they're walking into church, when they're paying attention to what's going on. If they see something, they should be that first line of defense. They should know who to talk to. They should know how to communicate. Or if it's somebody like myself, know how to actually intervene after contacting somebody. But it's the holistic approach that needs to take place. And what I've seen all too often, it's that left of bang that gets left out. The normalcy bias kicks in. For your listeners that are out there, it's a real thing. 70 to 80% of the time, we will see something that sets off that hair of the back of the neck or the gut feeling. It doesn't look right, but we don't do anything about it because, that's not real, or that would never happen here. And I wonder how much of that came into play on Saturday, where a lot of the people that were seeing what was going on at first, they didn't believe it. Law enforcement didn't necessarily believe it. When normalcy bias kicks in, it's very, very easy for people not to do anything. But when you're prepared, when you understand that you need to trust that hair on the back of the neck, that gut feeling, and act on it immediately to figure out what's going on and to take action, that goes back to what happened on Saturday. That's how you prevent those types of things from happening. I've gone through in my head, if I would have been one of those people that saw him on the roof with that gun and kneeled down, would I have taken a different action? Would I have just screamed, or would I run over there? Would I have tried to climb up on the roof? what if a bunch of people would try, to try and jump on the roof or do something or throw rocks up there, anything that they could do to, try to distract or to add to the elevation of how important it is. But that takes practicing a process and thinking about what you would potentially do. I do commend the civilians that were there that really saw that and were trying to do everything that they could. Secret Service has a lot of explaining to do.
They do. And that normalcy bias it's what gets everyone killed. That, like, you can go to, as we just saw, at a very, very high level to the Secret Service, to law enforcement who knows that they're part of a protective detail for a former president and, the person running front runner for the current coming presidency. And what you described, I think if you haven't been in our shoes and around that, the normalcy bias is that guy, that's not right that he's climbing on a roof, but surely that's actually a heat and air guy. And we just don't know because what are you talking about? The Secret Service is on the roof right there. If they needed to be on this roof, they'd be on this roof. There's police officers all here. If that roof needed to be watched, like, they've got it covered, obviously. So I'm sure some of the people in the audience who were in that same vicinity there by that building saw other people filming and freaking out and were like, kind of rolled their eyes. I'm sure that happened because that's so common in our normal day to day. When you think that something dramatic is happening, a lot of times it is, but it happens so few times to your average citizen, somebody with a law enforcement background. Every day you're taking emergency calls. So I'm going to a 911 situation 5, 6, 10, 15 times a day. Your average citizen's going to deal with that 1 or 2 times in their lifetime, maybe. And so it just takes that, the hair standing up on the back of your neck, and then you recognizing that something is wrong and making sure that you are the one who makes sure somebody's aware, blah, blah, blah. And again, all those things were being done, and we saw that in the video of people flagging toward the roof to the Secret Service agents, telling the police officers, and supposedly that the police officer who either climbed a ladder or he climbed up on somebody's shoulder, however he got up there, he climbed up on the roof, and once he poked his head up, the guy points the rifle at him, he falls down, runs away. Again, that falling down and running away, that's a normal human response. What is he supposed to do, right? Because again, everybody's going to Monday morning quarterback this. Why didn't he pull out his pistol and shoot and engage him? Okay, that's not reality. Reality is a guy laying on a roof that has every intention in shooting the president is definitely going to shoot you with a rifle long before you get your pistol up and get a shot off. So anybody trying to criticize that guy, that's not the person to go after. As working for dignitary protection in Iraq, what I know is the advanced team is the team that this truly falls on, because we're all focused on the bumbling agents who keep worrying about his shoe, the agents who are on the other side of him who are essentially being shielded by the president. Now, I know you have to have plates on 360, so I can give some grace there, but at the same time, they're not shielding him when he's standing up and doing his fist. That's great for his campaign, great for pictures, cool. Here's the problem. In reality, if you had a legit team who knew what they were doing, he wouldn't have had a second to raise his hand in the air. He wouldn't have had those moments, because you would have been grabbing a hold of him with your non-dominant hand, with your pistol in your other hand, and you would have been dragging him to the car. The case that everybody's looking at, I think Joe Rogan's already showed it and everybody else is too, is Ronald Reagan. When Ronald Reagan gets shot, he's out of the picture so fast that he was physically thrown into the car with agents diving on top of him. That is exactly what every Secret Service agent should have been doing is diving on him before that, scenario where he's sitting there and they're talking about a shoe. Can we get up and move? Can we get up and move? Are we ready? To your average citizen, they're thinking, okay, well, that makes sense because they don't want to stand up when somebody's possibly shooting. No, actually, you want to get them away from where the enemy already has him dialed in. So even if you got him down to the ground underneath, that's cool. Let's get him down there. And now let's take a split second before we know where we're going to get to the car. They should have already known that. But all of those things have to be done off the X, as it's called. And he was still on the X, meaning literally there's an X underneath his feet. They know exactly where he is. Rangefinders, rifles that can reach out and touch him. That's what you're worried about. They've already shot at him. There could be more. The follow-on attack is what most people are not paying attention to when they're looking at the scenario. Secret Service better be thinking of the next attack and the next attack. And that's why you don't have time to sit and fill for holes. You don't have time to assess a patient at that moment. You got to get him away from where the bullets could impact him again and then start figuring out all the rest. So that's my take on.
Yeah. So in that conversation, two things that I'll mention just briefly. You talked about the local police officer who, by the way, that's what's come out most recently, is that they did not have responsibility for that building. It was not local law enforcement's responsibility. They had responsibility for traffic, but they were responding to people that were pointing up there. So that police officer got on somebody else's shoulders, pulled up there, the weapon was pointed at him. And yeah, if even, I don't care who you are, if you got a weapon pointed at your head and you're holding on with two hands, you're going to get out of the way. So that's, he backed off of that. And I guess it was right after that, he went back to the stage and started pulling the trigger. So I think that the divine intervention was both President Trump turning his head, but also he did not have the full time to reacquire that sight before he started to pull the trigger, because that police officer did stick his head up. So that's the one thing that chimes in. Then that you were talking about how the agents responded. I'm not going to add anything to what you said, but what I watched the first night of Tuesday night of the convention, where Trump, that was the first time that he showed up, and every single Secret Service agent that was walking him out towards the stage was a 6'4", 230-pound man that if something were to happen, their full body could shield former President Trump. It was like we went from the C team on Saturday to the A team at the convention on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think this is another thing that people aren't, that if you're not familiar with doing dignitary protection or bodyguard work as a whole, you don't understand. It's not about sexism and all of these other things that people want to point to. The reality is that the size of your now I'm 5'10", I'm about 190. I've been lifting for 25 years consecutively. I am not the biggest dude. When we've got the ambassador who's 6'2", 6'3", I believe he's six. I think he was 6'3" as well. The guys who are physically on his immediate sides, that's called plates, because you have body armor. You are the physical plate. You aren't important. It's your body armor that's important, and that's beat into your head, drilled into your head when you're going through bodyguard school. And so they are the physical plate. That also has to do with out of sight. So your arm being in the way is not going to stop a bullet. However, it stops the sight and the ability for somebody to zoom in with a scope and to get a clear shot. And so the reality of having these tiny men or women or whatever, they physically can't do the job that they're supposed to do because they are physically not large enough to cover that space. And if you had somebody like Trump who's that large, that shouldn't be something that's up for debate. And, well, are you being sexist? Are you being picky based on me because I'm only 5'10". Bro, I'm 5'10". I'm not 6'3". He's 6'3". I can't be on the immediate circle. Now, I can be right around that, and I can be the driver, and I can be on the sniper scope. There's a whole lot of other things you can be doing, but you don't need to be the plates on of the president when you aren't large enough to be the plates. And I think that's something that, again, nobody talks about.
And I don't have anywhere near the level of experience or expertise like that you do, but I can just apply common sense and understand that. And, then listen to other people that talk about it, like you and Dan Bongino and some other folks and I actually have a very good friend of mine who's part of a team that I partner with at Paratus. They're doing active shooter training in schools right now. He's former Secret Service. Guy's got, smarter than me and has so much more skills than I do. And he's been sharing with me his thoughts and observations. And I've learned a lot, but I've also been able to, pat myself on the back. Hey, you thought about that correctly.
Yeah. So and I'm not some subject matter expert. There's dudes that have been doing bodyguard work overseas for 20 plus years. But again, I went through this training and then I did it in real life. Again, I was on the ambassador's personal protection detail. I was the driver in every single position of the motorcade for the ambassador, except for the ambassador's vehicle itself, because that, you just got to drive smooth. You don't do all the evasive, crazy, off each other's bumper, flying around the other vehicles in and out of traffic circles in Baghdad. That's what I did. That's what I'm suited for. But yeah, I learned things that I think, again, are common sense. And so when we see the female agents who are fumbling with their sunglasses, okay, let's put that up there as one part of the topic. You see she keeps fumbling with another one, fumbling with trying to get her weapon into her holster. The part that you already pointed out, the guy has his rifle pointed at this officer as he raises his head to look on the roof. Okay, I've been there. As a police officer, I walked into an ambush. This guy he just got out of prison. He wasn't going back alive. He had a pistol. He turned up the speakers. He had just put the gun to his girlfriend's head, and he was going to blow her head off. Then he yanked they had a phone, they had not a cell phone, but they had a actual wall phone. And so he yanked it out of the wall, like in old timey movies now. So all I know from dispatch is that this guy's absolutely going to murder this girl. And I am literally around less than a quarter of a mile from the house, just happened to be. It's one of the only times in my entire career in law enforcement where I'm literally right there when it's happening. I get over there. My backup is a couple of miles away through city traffic. So I'm on the spot. I'm supposed to wait for backup, but I hear her scream. I am going in. Doesn't matter. I go to the door. It's all windows in the front of the house, and he has the blinds that are the big, huge, real long blinds that are partially open, and some parts broke off so they can look out, of course. So I know already that I'm set up at a disadvantage, but I hear the scream, and so I immediately think, obviously, I've got to get in there. I know this is likely an ambush scenario, but time is of the essence. I've got to get in. So I run up and I go to the door. The door is open. There's a glass door that's shut in front. So the wooden door itself is closed, but the glass door is open, but the glass door is closed. So I have to actually open that. So I can't have two hands on the pistol. So I click it. I use my foot to kick it open. And as I go in, what I'm hoping is that I'm coming into a scenario where his focus is on her and she's still alive and I can get a shot off before he shoots her. Instead, I come into an ambush where he's literally with the music blasting at full blast, and he had a big, huge speakers in his house. I'm staring at a pistol, finger on the trigger, and he could be pulling the trigger as I'm looking. So my face literally broke the plane. I see it, and my body immediately rolled back out of the doorway, going back in reverse. and I call to dispatch and I let them know he's got a gun. He's got a gun. Now, I've never seen the things that I saw there. I experienced slow motion time. I could tell the exact caliber bullet that he was using. I could tell you exactly what the brand of pistol he was using, because it went from the normal size to this large in my actual vision. In my vision, it got a 3D screen, like a movie screen version of it was in front of my face. And so I could see every detail about that. If you haven't already read, I know you have, obviously, but for our audience, if they haven't read On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman and On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, that was the second book, was On Combat. The On Combat is where he talks about slow motion time. He talks about the auditory exclusion, which the music went away. As soon as I see this gun, the music is gone. And so a lot of things that my body is doing on its own, I have no control over. And so I escape to roll back. I don't know where she is, but I know she's not in here. She might already be dead in the back room. She might still be alive. She might have gotten away. I don't know. But I know that I got here really fast. And I know that the call just disconnected when they sent it out to me. So I'm hopeful that she's still in there. So I'm positioning myself to now try to sneak to the backside of the house. And so I'm checking and making sure he's not going to roll out the backside of the house at me, and that maybe I could surprise him going that way, because now I'm out of his vision. There's no way he could see me where I am. I'm also curious where my backup is. And I know he was flying through intersections, lights and sirens after the fact, but those seconds seemed like minutes. And so luckily, as I'm positioning myself and going back to go around the house, he actually comes out of the garage door, which the garage door was open. And he comes out and he's holding a TV remote control in his hand. He goes, "Hey, I wasn't pointing at anything. I wasn't pointing anything at you. Just this remote, just this remote." Again, now I didn't know it at that second, but of course he's covered in swastikas. He's Aryan Brotherhood. He just got out of prison and he doesn't want to go back. He thinks that he can trick me into thinking that I was looking at a remote. I don't know at that moment, but I know he's got no shirt on, he's got jeans, and he's got a remote in his hand. So I go get him down on the ground, I cuff him up. I send him off, and my partner actually is the one who takes him down. In that moment, much like what I can sympathize and empathize with that officer who saw that rifle pointed at his face. And like you pointed out, that most likely played a very big factor in why President Trump is still alive today, is because he did something. He didn't just stand by and go, I'm sure it's fine. He's got a rifle. Yeah, I'm sure the Secret Service is about to take him out. I don't want to get up there. I could end up getting shot. I got a pistol. He's got a rifle. My body armor will get defeated immediately by any rifle round. So literally, I'm not very well protected against him. I'm not protected against him at all, actually. And my little pistol is not going to do much against somebody who has a sniper rifle with a big scope on it. Taking the initiative and putting himself in harm's way, knowing it was the right thing to do, and knowing that if there's a guy on the roof with a rifle and a scope, he's completely unprepared. A pistol versus a rifle and body armor that police officers wear, which is soft armor, is not going to help you at all in the case of a gunfight there. So when he pops his head up and sees it's a guy pointing a rifle at his face, the reality is he's not prepared for that. He's not going to be able to defeat that guy. But as you pointed out, just him now being rushed, because now the police knows. In his head, I'm thinking, I would imagine, he thinks that guy's going to radio to the scope, snipers for the Secret Service who are definitely going to take him out. So he's got to get these shots off now, and that leads to what we saw on Saturday of their quick succession shots, and then the shots end and he's done very quickly. So he was right. If he had sat there and tried to dial it in, I'm sure he probably would have already been taken out, which would have been right, left a bang. Let's stop it before it actually happens. This was an example of you're putting people who are already right. You've got the C team physically around them who aren't prepared, obviously, mentally, or with the agent actually, her pointing her weapon at everybody in the audience, pointing it at her fellow agents, pointing it everywhere at everybody, goes to show that she was not prepared or trained properly to begin with to do this, and or if she was, her fight, flight, all those, there's a whole lot of different ones to all this. The fine motor skills, that's the very first thing to go away when you are in a scenario of life and death. And so your body is going to react without you thinking of it. So if your natural, your natural training and state is to never point your weapon at anyone at any time, including yourself, it's naturally going to happen. Your pistol is going to go down and you're going to stay there, or you're going to go to the holster. But trying to go in the holster, which is another thing that she's criticized for, I can give some grace there, because actually that fine motor skill of going into the holster, although we do that a million times just in the few weeks in the police academy so that it is second nature to you, especially if you change your holster, your body's been trained for one holster. You got to train just as long for that other holster, or you're carrying it concealed carry. You're used to carrying it on your hip. Now it's in your bag. You got to swing that bag forward to get to it. Your body, when it's thinking of run, hide, fight, is going to do things that it will make you look like you have never trained for this moment ever, unless you are mentally ready and have physically gone through those actions. Like you're talking about with your program, I think that's the key is this is a year-long program so that you are forced to be thinking about this on a regular basis. And I think that's where Left of Bang starts. I think you have to recognize that this is not a class you take one time, you go to the range, you know how to shoot, and then you can just go do that from then on. Now, when I went to personal quick story there, when I went from law enforcement, leaving law enforcement, I actually went and lived on oil rigs for a few years. And for those years, I mean, I'm literally living on oil rigs all the time, like 300 plus days a year I'm working. I'm not going out and shooting, and you're not allowed to shoot on oil rigs. Imagine that. I don't know why. And so I don't really get a lot of practice during that time. And then I end up getting laid off, and I move out here to Florida. And I went to the range a few times, but I haven't touched a squad automatic weapon. I haven't touched a 240 Bravo, a big, huge 7.62 big machine gun, the largest that you're going to hand carry typically in a platoon, in years, like not since '05 when I got out of the Rangers. And even then, I wasn't carrying one of those things around except for in Ranger school often. And so I'm going to go to bodyguard school. Well, I'm definitely not just dead shot when I first get there, and I never have been anyways. I'm a good shot, but I'm definitely not just I come in and I hit it bullseye every time. But the all of the training that I'd put in for years did carry over to where I was able to pick that up very quickly. But I wasn't, if I got into a gunfight on the first day that I show up and they have me do a stress test, even not a real gunfight, nothing's coming toward me, no sim rounds, I'm just stressed, I guarantee you I would have missed so many of those shots. Because even if you spent years of your life and you were in special ops and all you did was live, eat, live, breathe, guns, working out all the time, doing all of these things, if you don't carry that forward on a regular basis, and regular is the key, even if you just do it a couple of times a week or once a week, and you're sitting down thinking about that, that's more than the vast majority of most people. And the scary part is, though, too, in that scenario where the lady has a bird, let's say she has a gun, and let's say that day she just came in and whatever these people at this store said to her last, she was angry and she's going to come in there and cause a disturbance. She sees my wife and she doesn't like the look of her face. That moment that you're in, all of that time that you had to prepare, right? It's there. You might not ever need it, but the time that you're going to need it, it might make the difference between life and death. And you can hear Eric Thomas and you can hear all the motivational speakers saying the exact same thing we're saying about preparing yourself for a life and death situation, but they're talking about a moment of opportunity. It applies identically. You can lay it on top of each other seamlessly. That time that you're preparing for that job, or you're preparing, you have this opportunity to talk to this one person and make a connection. That's exactly the same thing that's going to happen in real life at some point to somebody that you know or care about. Life and death situations happen every day. Just because they don't happen to you every day doesn't mean that that day isn't coming, and that day is going to happen, and your family's depending on you. Your friends are depending on you. Your life is depending on you, and your kids want you to come home. And just doing this training with your program, I think could save, and it doesn't have to save 1 million lives a year. It just needs to save one. That one life might be your life, and that one life is precious to your family beyond measure. You have no idea what it's like for you to be taken from your family. As a police officer, I unfortunately got to witness all the time somebody losing their life, having to go give death notices of just somebody dying in traffic somewhere else, but their family lives in Moore, in Oklahoma City, where I was at, and I have to go break the bad news to them at 2 a.m. and wake them up and let them know their son isn't coming home. That moment changes you as a human, because you have to be the one to give that news. And I swear to you that if that person could somehow erase that moment and have that life back, that opportunity, again, from your perspective, do you have any examples of that? Because I think it's super powerful when somebody has prepared and that they actually saved themselves or someone that they loved. Just curious.
Yeah, so there's lots of stories. One of the things we talk about is that I talked about how preparation overcomes fear, but you also don't rise to an occasion. You fall to the level of your preparation. I am one of those guys that I think I've mentioned, I pretty much carry everywhere that I go, but I practice almost every single day, drawing my weapon. Every time I go to bed, I have a process of how I'm going to defend the home, who's in the home, where are the safe lanes to shoot, where aren't the safe lanes, what rounds do I have in my weapon. That's a part of my process that I do every single night. A quick story. So we own an apparel screen printing company, and we were doing some overtime on a Saturday, and there were a few new employees that came in to help that day. And I'm at the end of the dryer catching shirts. They go through the dryer to be cured after they're printed. And I'm drawing my weapon from my holster, sighting it, and dry firing it. So I'm doing that for about 5 minutes. And my wife, who's actually doing the printing, looks at me, looks over at the new employees, and I sense that. So I look at the new employees, and their eyes are wide open because they're going, why is the owner of the shop pulling a gun out while we're here, right? But that's, my wife said, obviously you can do that. Just tell them ahead of time. But that's the practice piece, right? The white settlement shooting here in Texas at that church where the one of the guardians was killed was because he was carrying his weapon underneath his sport coat at the 4 o'clock position, and he never practiced clearing his jacket and drawing his weapon. So that's why he was unable to do that. So that's going to your point. That's where it's so important to continually do that practice. And then when I talk about it, I also use sports analogies a lot, right? So, one of the things I played football, I wrestled, I played baseball, I played hockey, I played lacrosse, did a lot of different things. Almost every single coach said you want to bleed in practice so that you know and you've already done the muscle movement when you get into the game. So that's part of it. You have to do that continual practice so you have that muscle memory. So you're not like that one agent. I don't even know if she was a real Secret Service agent or not, but she demonstrated a lot of things that you and I really don't understand why that was taking place. But the other thing I talk about, especially for people that want to carry weapons or they want to defend their home with a weapon, is you don't just go to the range and put 50 rounds through a target, sight your long rifle, whatever the case may be. You've got to be able to go to a range or go somewhere where you actually put yourself in that stressful situation. I talk about an example playing, horse with my brothers. I'm 5'9", they're 6'3". I wrestled, they played basketball, but I had a pretty decent shot, right? So if we're just playing horse and we're just doing shots around the basket, I could hold my own. But as soon as I had to dribble, run, and then try and shoot at the same time, I would turn into that wrestler to try and tackle my brothers because there's no way I could do anything. So that's why it's so important. If you want to truly be able to use your weapon in a stressful situation, we talked about the mental health and the thought process, but the right of bang process is extremely important as well. You need to put yourself in situations to know how you're going to react under that stress when you have that weapon, so that you know what you are capable of doing. And here's the other thing about our program, because we don't just, like I said, talk about active shooting. We talk about all the things that we deal with, and we talk about those 10 critical skills. I have time and experiences every single day when I'm dealing with my German short-haired pointer who is very insubordinate. So how do I have humility and patience and those types of things? How do I interact with my wife? Am I able to not escalate situations? Am I able to actively listen and have a conversation with her? We have a society today where people don't actively listen. They don't critically think. They listen to respond, and their opinions are fact. If we can empower everybody with these 10 critical skills and for them to practice those with the dozens of opportunities we have every day, it could make a huge difference in what's going on in our republic and our ability to be prepared to help others and to listen to others. See, that's the other key thing here, I think, Seth, is that when you learn and develop this skill, especially as a parent, you want to make sure your kids are getting what they need. If you're not being perceptive, if you're not actively listening to them, if you're not critically thinking about what they're saying, if you're not paying attention, if you're not having empathy, if you're just seeing a bad behavior and now you're going to punish that behavior, you're not doing anything to change those habits and behaviors. And that's one of the key things that we need to change, is going away from punishment of a behavior to how do I instill the types of habits and behaviors that I want them to have. But that takes having that situation awareness and being able to identify their current behavior, putting yourself into their shoes. Why are they thinking this way? What is their perspective? If you don't do all of that, you're never going to be able to make a difference.
Absolutely. And again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this. Tell the audience where they're able to find your program and sign up.
Yeah, so there's two websites right now. It's Paratus.group, that's Paratos.group, and then there's also briangsearcy.com. So those are the two places they can go learn about our program. As I mentioned, our focus is to get it in the hands of parents so parents can learn and develop the skill and then educate their kids. But we also go into churches, we also go into businesses, and we also go into schools. So right now I have a partnership, a brand new partnership with a independent school district here in North Texas. For every time a parent enrolls in the program, $20 goes back to the school so they can put a tactical individual first aid kit in every single classroom. See, I'm a huge proponent of that. Most schools and businesses today might have a tactical IFAC, so it's got the a tourniquet and quick clot and gauze and all those types of things and a chest seal. But they'll be in the hallway where the gunman is going to be, instead of having one in every single classroom. So that's why we're partnering across the United States to be able to give back to those school districts so they can actually go buy those kits and put them in every single classroom. And I'm also a huge proponent that every single home needs one. You should have one in your car. It goes back to one of the things I talked about earlier, that you've got to not only develop the habits and behaviors. I think I talked about it. Maybe I didn't. You need to have the training to use tools, but then if you don't have the tools, it doesn't do any good. So, so in my car, I've got jumper cables, I've got a tactical medical kit, I've got a whole host of things. Same thing in the home. I've got many, many stories of people that have gone through tactical training. They learned how to use a tourniquet, but then they didn't have one in their home. And when it came time to use one, they didn't have it. So it didn't do any good. So, Seth, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'll definitely have all of your website and everything linked in the podcast. And again, it was great having you on. We'll definitely probably have you on again later on. But I'm definitely, curious to see how all this unfolds and the lessons that we can learn from the assassination attempt. And again, that's ultimately, we want to take those lessons that they're learning on that level that everybody's breaking down right now. And you can use those, like we're talking about, in your own life to, protect you and your family and your church and your school. And that is the ultimate goal of the School to Embassy project. So
awesome.
Great. I will talk to you later, Brian.
Thanks, and God bless.
God bless.